Welcome to the podcast from the University of Staffordshire, Dan Lewis and Richard Gilmartin. Hello, gentlemen.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Ben.
Hi.
Great to be here with both of you. So first of all, I would like Dan Lewis to introduce himself. Go ahead, Dan.
Thanks, Pierre. I'm Dan Lewis. I'm the course director for design here at the University of Staffordshire.
And I'm Richard Gilmartin. I'm course leader for specifically automotive and transport design.
Very well. Thank you, both of you, for making time today. So first of all, Dan, I'd like to start with you. Can you give me about your background and how you got to the university?
Yeah. So I actually studied here. I did my degree at the University of Staffordshire quite a few years ago in product design. I worked as a product and furniture designer in industry, and I really enjoyed that job. I got to travel a lot as part of what I was doing and developing products for kind of to be sold around the world. And then I decided to come back to the university and started working part-time as a lecturer. That was 13 years ago now, so I've been here quite a while. And since then, we've kind of continued to evolve our courses in design and around the department. And obviously, automotive and transport design that Rich leads is just one of those. I've also just recently completed my PhD, which is in emotional design. So considering kind of, how products, vehicles, experiences interact with us on a emotional level. So, yeah, it's a really a great place to work and a really kind of fun time to be involved in design.
Wow. Very impressive. Dan, a couple more questions. You said furniture. Did you have a specific, any specific type of furniture or type of medium you like to use? I'm just curious.
So I developed really kind of mass market, mass produced products, things like TV stands and home office desks, audio furniture, which sold in kind of big retailers in the UK as well as small independents. But it was definitely mass production and a lot of kind of products being made out in Asia. So I would travel there and work with the factories to get these products made. Yeah, so that kind of segment of the market.
Oh, very cool. Richard, well, unfortunately, this is going to be a podcast only, so they can't see what I'm seeing, but you're wearing a Detroit Tigers hat.
I am, yes.
Very close to my heart, so you need to tell me the story about that hat.
Yeah, so you're a Tigers fan.
I've been in Detroit a long time, yes.
Yeah, so Michael, one of our students who was shortlisted last year, is now working in the Ford studio in Detroit. And I like wearing hats. And it was like, Michael, you better get me a hat. So he came back and he brought me a Detroit Tigers hat. So
Aww.
it's cool. Yeah, I'd like to go and visit a game. I did want a fitted one, but he didn't get us one. So I'll put in another request for a fitted one as well, I think.
Very cool story. Yeah, I spent a long time in Detroit, so yeah, I saw the Tigers hat. So I'm like, oh,
yeah,
excellent.
It's a really cool city, Detroit, isn't it? We used to go when I was working at Bentley, and we'd go to the motor show, and there's just a real interesting, vibrant energy in Detroit. I used to love that show. It was great.
All right, so you were unfortunate to visit Detroit in the dead of January when it's the coldest.
yeah, it felt very much like true romance. Yeah.
So is that your background in the industry, Bentley? What's your
so I started off on an industrial design degree. So I qualified in industrial design, and then I went to work for Rover Group, as it was in the day, which is, as we all know, JLR now. But I started working as a studio engineer in the studio. And that was between 95 to 99. So as a studio engineer, I was doing some packaging and ergonomics. But I also got introduced to Alias. And that was, I think I first started using Alias in either 96 or 97. And being in the studio and coming from an industrial design degree, I didn't want to stay as an engineer. So I did a master's at Coventry. And from there I went to Bentley. But I always felt like I had to use alias as part of the design process, because back in those days, the designers didn't really use alias as part of their process. They were very much sketchers, and then modelers would make it. It'd go more into clay, and then it'd be reverse engineered into alias. That whole digital totally changed now, as we know. But so being 3D digital literate has always been a really big part of my process. I was at Bentley for 13 years. I worked as a designer, and then part of my progression, I set up the visualization department back in 2010. But then, my urge was to go back into design. Went back into design. Then I left, went to work for SAIC for a few years, and then I came back to Bentley mainly because I missed where I lived. It was quite personal, really. And that's where I got involved with the university. So they did a module that was an alias module, and they needed someone to teach it on a Friday afternoon, which worked with the structure of working in a car studio. Everything quietens on a Friday afternoon. So I developed my relationship with the university. And then during COVID, the opportunity to come full-time at the university happened as they rebranded and renamed their courses and wanted to develop the transport design course. So I came and joined Dan. So it's been good fun ever since. Yeah.
Nice. So then, can you describe this rebirth or relaunch of the transportation program from your point of view?
Absolutely, yeah. So I guess our university has an amazing history of creativity and creative courses from its kind of birth over 100 years ago, and the coming together of lots of art colleges in Stoke-on-Trent. So we're in Stoke-on-Trent, which is known as the Potteries in the UK. So it had and still has to some extent an amazing ceramics industry. So we've always taught design and craft, and I think we've probably taught an equivalent of kind of product industrial design, multidisciplinary design for well over 50 years. But over the last kind of 10 to 15 years that I've been here, we've moved into slightly different courses. And just before Rich joined, our transport design was kind of a pathway within another course. But we really, over the last few years, have developed its identity in its own course, its strength as its own course, and what Rich has brought are these amazing links with industry that has really taken the course to another level. So it's about giving it more of its own identity and something for students to really feel part of a community on that course, but also in the wider university area. So but I'd say the kind of industry connections that Rich has brought has really just improved it and developed our reputation and our reach globally, actually.
Yeah, Rachel, you said you were drawn back to launch the program. So what did you want to achieve when you came to University of Staffordshire?
I really wanted to create something that put us on a map. We're never going to be a big course, but what we can be is a really thorough course that shows our students all the opportunities in not just automotive and transport design, but the whole design industry. Because I think transport design is non-specific in a way that during your degree, you do graphic design, you do sketching, you're doing artwork in Photoshop, you're building digital models, you're animating digital models, you're sculpting in clay, you become excellent presenters, you do CMF, you have to understand engineering and modeling. So it's 3D, it's 2D, it's moving forms, it's an opportunity. And I think if we can bring that to, especially we get a lot of local students from around the area. So when they're at school, they have no idea of what transport design is, or the opportunities, or the career potential and that. And I think working within a small area, we can even educate these young kids and like show them, you know, what's out there and what skills they can gain. So it was like to nurture something and to get recognition for what we do. We might not be massive, but hopefully we can really start to produce quality students ready for industry and give them that opportunity in industry. And it's all about the students and what they can give the world is what motivates us, really.
So, I mean, from what I see, you have a multidiscipline approach to teaching. So from your perspective then, how do you integrate that into like both curriculum and the BA and the MA? How do you see that?
Yeah, so I suppose if we look at the BA first, really that is across the 3 years or 4 years with the placement, about taking students who perhaps had very little kind of contact with the automotive industry or transport design and introducing them to that and exposing them to the opportunities of the industry. And it also, you know, it's about raising aspirations and ambition as well for perhaps people who were unaware of some of the opportunities before. But the first year is really about foundations and getting the skills that you need, both kind of through analog techniques, sketching. Rich is always sketching, he's sketching as we speak, but also the digital skills where, of course, all the Autodesk software and everything else comes in. And then over the second year, they're really working more with industry, developing more live projects before kind of finding their own voice and their own style in the third year, where they then take on a major project and aim that at the kind of career, kind of industry they want to focus on. Our master's program, which is we call it MANS, it's a master's by negotiated study. The students have loads of control over what they actually do on it. So they have a series of negotiated projects and they get assigned supervisors. So typically, you know, myself, Rich, our colleagues, to develop projects, and they might decide that they want their projects to be very much automotive based, or they might be for rail. They might even be UX, UI kind of projects. We've had people do, all sorts of different things over the years. But
Erky did visualization. Just focused on visualization. He used AI as one of his modules because you get 4 modules that you choose. So one was like purely about AI, and then he did one which was all about organization and structure in vred, I think. Then he did one that was Unreal Engine, and then I can't remember this other one, but one where he brought it all together, and he tried to use all softwares across the broad spectrum and integrate it into one video at the end. So it was really an expression of his skill set.
Yeah. So I think across the BA and the MA, it's taken students from that point of really supportive, lots and lots of support, and they do get a lot of one-to-one support here because of our modest class sizes, through to someone who's complete independent, automotive transport designer or visualizer or clay model or whatever it is they want to do, that at the end are really independent and ready for work or freelance or employability, whatever they want to do. So yeah, we see it as a kind of journey through those years.
Then you mentioned something, a negotiated study. How does the negotiations go usually? Is it something completely out of a left field, or?
Yeah, they can be fun. We can get some mad proposal ideas that we have to reflect on very carefully as a team. And you're right, negotiation is a great word for these projects. But typically, actually, students have some really great ideas, and we just want to push them and stretch them and challenge them so that they don't rest on their laurels and just do a kind of another add-on year, but that year that they spend on masters with us really progresses them and kind of, acts as a sort of launch pad into the industry and really develops them as individuals. The negotiations are all about us pushing them often.
Yeah,
not trying to hold them back.
No, no, good for them. And negotiation, yeah. The skills of negotiating will be handy for them later on in their career. So I think that's a good step. Richard, you mentioned something that's intriguing. You said, you were not necessarily a school for transportation at the beginning, or you becoming one. I mean, I went to school in Detroit, and I can tell you there was a bunch of people with their head down, drawing ellipses all day and making car noises. Okay, they were just obsessed with being car guys. They were car guys. I was a car guy. I wasn't making noises when I was sketching, but you have a very stereotypical guy who wants to be a car guy, right?
Yeah.
When you have more well-rounded students, how does it different? How does it make him better? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's your experience?
We still get car guys, and but because we fall under, like Dan was talking about his role as course director, he oversees 5 courses. Is it 5 or 6? Yeah, 5 courses. And we have a sister course called Product Furniture Ceramics. So the initial skills are fundamentally the same. So we share a lot of modules in the first year, and both courses get to blend and meld together for a while. And then we rip them apart in the second year. And then they come together again in the third year. And I think for the petrol heads, it's really important for them to get a feel of ceramics and clay and be comfortable in making stuff in the woodworking shop. I mean, when I was working at Bentley, I always talked to the students about this, that if I'd have had the knowledge now that I have about ceramics, and coming to a university that's heavily involved in ceramics and part of British history in ceramics, would that have impacted the design work that I did at Bentley when I was working as an interior designer at Bentley? So I think they may not realize at the moment that what they're doing has a relevance, but later in their lives and their design careers, if they can come back to a moment of doing a raku firing pot, that it just triggers something then and sends them off in a research direction that's very different. Because as we all know, that the dream job, if you are obsessed with cars, is to be an exterior designer, but there isn't that many exterior design roles. But there are more roles in the wider industry. So it's like opening them up to what is available and what they can do. And that's a part of that education that we try to put on those guys. And then the other guys that we do get to provide that softer design experience. And when we get good year groups, both sets influence each other, and we start to get really good. Our final year at the moment is quite a good example of that, of non-car guys and petrol heads. Yeah.
No, I think if they could understand that looking at things other than cars will give them an edge, that's probably the best way to go. But not everybody sees it that way, obviously. You're mentioning that you're sketching all the time. Well, Dan made the observation, and I think that's great. How do you enforce the fundamentals to your students, knowing that it's a cool 3D car on Instagram? That's always, the fight. How do you give them solid foundations?
There's exercises that we do. We embed it that, just to be able to create sketches that big, couple of inches, 3 inches, is the foundation of imprinting an idea on paper. So even if they're very digital literate and they make their design straight away, if they can imprint an idea quickly with proportions and stance correctly, or some important graphic for an interior very quickly onto paper, it has that naturalness, that looseness. They can then interpret it into CAD really quickly.
Yeah. I always use that example of to students who actually perhaps are a bit more CAD, a CAD fan, I suppose, and say, oh, I don't want to draw it. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a quick model. I'm going to do this. Kind of like, well, if you've got a client in front of you or you're working in a team, if you pull your laptop over to you and start clicking around on mouse for however long, that's not a good thing to watch. But actually, if you have that ability to just get a bit of paper or an envelope or whatever that you have and just do a little 10-20 second sketch, whether that's a product, a vehicle or whatever, it's kind of magic and really engaging, and it's such an important skill. And I think once the students realize that, which they always do really quickly actually, then they recognize and they kind of embrace it. And seeing Rich constantly sketching also, if Rich is acting as a role model for those design students around him who want to be able to sketch like that too. So yeah, I think it's just making them realize how valuable it is, and then they want to do it.
Yeah, and we all have a similar message as well, that everything you do is the same process. So if you sketch correctly, you're drawing in 3D and you're drawing in the section lines and you're drawing in the bone lines. That's exactly what you do when you make a clay model. You cut in the main sections and then you cut in the bone lines. It's how you create a model with NURBS. It's how you build Photoshop. You're dragging in big blocks of color and then you're erasing out. So you're just cutting in shapes that 3D form. So if you can get that in the sketching, it then makes everything easier as you move through that process.
By the way, I'm probably one of the most digital persons ever, but I always tell them the foundation of whatever you build will be a good sketch. So yeah, I do try to tell them that, but not everybody sees it that way. Anyway.
And also another analogy that we like to use is it's a language.
Mm.
Yeah,
and now as vehicle design is more global. You might be in a studio with a Chinese engineer who struggles with English a bit, that you could really communicate through a sketch much better than words.
Yeah.
Definitely. Dan, you're mentioning that, it's more magic to draw in front of your clients. So that brings me to the industry. So how do you see the school collaborating with the industry in general?
So I think for a long time, we've had a really good reputation of working with industry, particularly on live projects. And that's so valuable for the students to engage with industry in that way, that they will meet a client in kind of week one. And then, 5-6 weeks later, we'll have that interim crit, and then they'll come back for their final review. And it just makes them take projects really seriously. It's all good and well for us to kind of make a brief and stuff, but nothing can replicate getting a real brief from a real client and having that level of engagement with them. They really respect that. And we've moved through loads of different kind of clients, different segments, some locally, nationally and internationally. But I think those clients and then placements are kind of two of the most valuable things to us. Rich, do you want to talk about some of the clients that you've introduced that we work with?
Yeah, so it's a tricky ground working with clients that sometimes I have to go and ask for projects, but also some of my friends in industry say, "Oh yeah, we'd love to work with you," and we have to be really careful of which year you expose to the client. So first year, we could never really release them to an OEM because the level of work would just get hammered. Yeah, and so it should be, but that's where they're expected to be in their educational journey. They've only been doing it for 1 year, and they're just skill building. And the way they learn is they do blocks of skills, and then they practice those skills. In the second year, they start putting those skills together, and then the third year, they put those skills together on their own. So second year, they're taught how to put the skills together. Third year, they're expected to go and put the skills together. So first year, we're always looking for little startups. A couple of startups that I know have been brilliant at supporting us, and we just expect a couple of afternoons from the client, or maybe bring in their product and they can have a play with it. So, but the students get the feeling that it's a real life project and they're involved in something, and you know, some of them even believe that their design's going to get made, and how are they going to sort the money out afterwards?
And the idea.
And it's not quite like that. And then second year we get a couple of projects. We've done a project with LEVC for the past few years, looking at taxi type spaces for the students. And that's been they've been absolutely brilliant supporter of us. And then we do a clay modeling module where they model a car, and then halfway through it's like someone scratches the record, and then they have to rip it up and create their own design on that car. And then they have to create their new vision, make it in clay. They build it digitally. They do the renderings. They do animation. So it's like a mini major project, but they do it in 6 weeks. So
wow.
And they do a 5th scale clay in that. So it's quite intense. So we've got another OEM this year coming to support us with that. We had an OEM client last year that helped us with that. This is that feedback from OEM designers and OEM professionals, even though we bang on about it and like kind of like ex-professionals, hearing it from an industry professional totally changes their perspective on it. And they will quote you back what you say to them because someone else said it to them.
Well, yeah, it's like your children. You can tell them, don't put their hand on the stove, and then they just do it anyway. But if somebody tells them, oh, you better not put your hand on the stove, they'll be like, oh, yeah, right.
yeah, totally. yeah. There are design children.
Been there. So you mentioned clay. That's very interesting because I personally love it. Again, digital guy, but I think the skills I've learned myself working on a clay model have been invaluable. So how do you balance like old school and new school? What feedback have you gotten from OEMs about what should be taught in school? Do you have any comment on that?
I think we try and balance the skills so that students get exposed to different career options, different parts of the industry and different skills. So we've got a fantastic associate lecturer, Tim Potts, who comes in and teaches the first and second years that automotive clay kind of styling and process. And it's quite technical and it's quite different to some of the other perhaps freer things that the students do, but they really enjoy it. And they also enjoy the different kind of teaching approaches from the different academics and how we may deliver that content and how we might support them. But what's universal is the kind of one-to-one support they get because of the smaller class sizes that we have. But yeah, it is a balance of everything. So, you know, they are taught those physical modeling and clay modeling skills, but they're also taught in how to drive AI as a tool. So it's kind of everything from past, present, and future. But the OEMs are always really excited, aren't they, to see things still being done and things being done perhaps maybe how they were when they were at uni or college, but that are still relevant today. And that it isn't just a load of students sitting in a computer room just doing, you know, software teaching. That's just one element of everything. And this kind of crosses all of the design and art courses in our department that have that same approach, but it's kind of combining theory with practice. So, you know, you're not going to be in a lecture theatre, you're going to be learning in a studio, doing things, experiential learning effectively.
Yeah, and it's like, as we know in industry, a lot of the best surface modelers digitally were clay modelers originally because they really understand surfaces and how they go together. So that even if they're not using it, and more studios move away from clay altogether, actually is a learning tool to understand the process and realize, especially when students come into the design world and they're very poly based, they don't understand how surfaces are created, but they can make these beautiful shapes, but then they don't truly understand the creation and the structure of the surfaces behind. Doing that with a lump of clay is very visceral, and there's no escape. You can't lie. You can't BS your way through it. It's you and a slick and a rake, and you have to understand it and do it correctly. And once they get that, I think it has a massive shift in their overall level as a designer. The ones that get it, because then they make things differently, they draw things differently, they understand things differently. So I think it is really valuable and really powerful.
No, I would totally agree with that. And also the best designers I ever worked with, they could draw you sections. They could get on a clay model and slick aside if they had to. So no, I completely agree with that assessment. On the other end of the spectrum, Dan, you mentioned AI. So what's the overall mood with the students? Because I've seen all types of attitudes: fear, dread, excitement. What's the overall temperature at your university?
Yeah, I think you're right to say you do get that full sliding scale from, kind of fear. Is this going to take my job? Am I now training for a job that won't exist in 5 years' time? Or those actually who obviously are really excited about it, who are already using it in their work. That poses challenges as well for us, for academic integrity, for plagiarism, for everything else. But what we're doing is we're being, across all of our courses, really open with students in talking about AI early on and saying, okay, this is what responsible use of AI looks like and how we can use it as a tool, just like we use a pen or a computer, but in a responsible way. So that might be feeding it a sketch to look at alternatives, to look at rendering and stuff, but always to reworking that. And that's the same if we're using ChatGPT to help write a report. If you're feeding that some information and it's refining your text, that's fine. You're kind of doing that. If you're asking it to do your project for you, clearly that's not acceptable. So it is about being, having an open conversation with students about that. But I think from our point of view, at the moment, it's a useful tool that actually can support students. I suppose, Rich, similar.
Yeah, I mean, when it first came out, I was like full of fear and But then you get to use it and you understand it, and it's a useful tool. I think the great thing about our industry is it's the industry of change. Nothing is ever right. Even when something's out, we want to change it. So there's always work. There's always got to be change and progress. And even if the computer turns something out, we're going to find faults with it and want it. And that's why we need humans in the process. That's why we need people that can sketch and understand what's bad and what's not and what's good and can influence that. And whether it's using AI tools or whether it's manual tools, sometimes I just want to get my hands on it and influence it that way.
Yeah.
So having used it, is it Stephen Covey said it in his 7 Rules for Life, that the best way to understand is to be understood, or the best way to understand is well, I can't remember it. Something about
no idea.
You have to understand someone before you can be understood, is what he said.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple of kind of friends who are doing freelance projects more on the product side of it and stuff, and they've got clients who've said, we want to develop this particular product or this particular kind of app in one case, and and they've said we've had to go with AI. We've got it to generate some concepts, but we don't like what it's come up with. We actually want you as an experienced human to create something fresh here for us and something more considered. I think sometimes it's quite likely that AI is going to chuck out solutions that don't have much meaning or story behind them. They are very surface level, very conventional, because they probably are just averaging everything that exists right now. Yeah. So when you do want a little bit of that fresh, new, magic human touch, you've got to rely on humans.
And these quick visualizations from sketches, they're great to engage people in what you're trying to approach easily. But I think reality, standing around a model and seeing how lines are slightly differently, and you can never judge that on a computer as well. Yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah. So with AI obviously being a nice bridge to the future of education, where do you guys see the future trends for teaching the students? Where do you see that going? I'll start with you, Dan.
I think certainly within our department, which is the Department of Creative Industries here at the University of Staffordshire, we are looking at a continued but more collaboration across the courses. Historically, it's quite easy for courses and course teams to become siloed and do their own thing. And courses, as I mentioned earlier, that have their own identity and that have their own studio, but then perhaps don't collaborate as much as they should. So for us, collaboration across the courses, modules where students are interacting with other disciplines is going to be really important for us. And also, there's constantly fluctuating trends in student numbers on different disciplines. So this kind of helps level that all out a bit and share it and find kind of efficiencies is not a nice word, but it kind of works. But it also just brings creatives together. So last year, automotive and transport design did some amazing collaborations with our architecture course, our fashion course, and ceramics. So there's kind of really nice points where students can come and collaborate. And I think sometimes there's a bit of a hesitancy there to say, I don't want to go and work with those students. I don't want to go and do fashion. I don't want to do architecture. But it's about saying, okay, no, you're going there to be an expert in your field. They're going to remain the expert in their field. And actually, it just strengthens your own identity rather than forcing you to do something you don't want to. You're the expert in that. So, yeah, collaboration for us going forwards, I think, is really important. Yeah. It's probably worth saying as well that, higher education landscape in the UK is quite challenging. Lots of changes to policy over the last 10 to 20 years within government has meant that the number of students in our secondary schools that are studying creative art and design courses has nosedived. There's significantly less students taking that route with a real focus on STEM subjects. So, kind of science, engineering, maths, those kind of subjects, which I recognise are really important for future jobs. But we've seen a real dip in creative courses, which are a huge part of the UK and global economy. So, yeah, I'm optimistic that we'll see an increase in that and a bit of a resurgence. There's definitely students who are sort of wanting to get back into hands-on, practical, creative courses that are so fulfilling as careers when perhaps other things might not suit them, that they're being kind of pushed into. So, yeah, I'm hopeful that we'll see improvements there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is a real frustration that the government, especially previous governments in this country, haven't respected the creative industries. Yet everything they wear has been designed, everything they travel in has been designed, everything they eat has generally been designed unless it's been grown. Design is such an important subject, and we wouldn't have the civilization we had without design. So I think it deserves greater respect from governments, really.
It's creativity in general as well, isn't it? It's performance, it's drama, it's music, it's everything that is kind of surrounded creativity. I think in the UK, has taken a real downturn, particularly in secondary education, and we hope that there's a resurgence in that, and are optimistic.
To paraphrase a very famous person, if we're not fighting for the arts, what are we fighting for, right?
Absolutely. Totally.
And I think to go with the collaboration, the teaching should feel more fluid. That we start to educate the students to look at everything more as a creative process. So they're not just drawing, but when they're drawing, they're doing it digitally as well. When they're doing it digitally, they're thinking about a physical outcome. That could be 3D printing as part of the process. Rather than a linear structure, which is historically the way education was taught. You do a sketch, you do Photoshop, you make a CAD model, you then make a physical model, then you do your presentation, then you present it. But is if you do lots of loops all the way, the evolution of the design at the end is far more developed. And the way they work is more elastic and much better suited for industry or being entrepreneurs or whatever they decide to do.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. So we are rounding up almost to the last few questions. So I do have one question for you guys. Obviously, you have a lot of students who will graduate next year, probably May, June timeframe, I guess. So what piece of advice will you give them? So Dan, starting with you.
I think being open to opportunities is really important. And I think, aiming for your dream job and everything is really important. But actually, as we've kind of talked about, collaboration and being broader in your outlook to looking at opportunities in other places. We've had loads of graduates who've started off in a job that didn't seem exactly aligned with their exact dream job, but the experience they've gained at that particular place has taken them on to the most amazing careers and their dream job. So to remain kind of open and to keep in touch with their cohort and to build that professional network with their own cohort, with us, with previous and future cohorts, because connections are really valuable, as we all know. So I think that would be one piece of feedback, kind of keep in touch with everyone and don't be short-sighted in your opportunities. Look broadly and see what could fit.
Yeah, for me, it's build relationships. You could be the most talented person in the world, but if no one ever sees your work or you don't talk to anyone, then no one's going to know about you. So it's about building relationships and building momentum and keeping that momentum going. And such a good point, like Dan said, just get a job at first. And then keep working on your portfolio, keep making contacts. At some point, you're going to get something. We had a student a few years ago, Haj. He and it must be hard for him because he was from Algeria. And he came here, he studied, then he went away, he didn't have anything. And what you could see for about 4 years, he just kept posting his stuff on LinkedIn week after week, relentlessly. Next minute, he's in Dubai working for a customs garage, designing all their custom parts. So it paid off, and it was just that persistence. His work got better, and it was really great to see, really, that persistence and self-belief and making those connections on LinkedIn eventually got him recognized. And
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention massive connection between University of Staffordshire and Autodesk, as you were our finalist for our contest. Hopefully we'll have more entries this year. How are your students doing?
Yeah, I got an email, well, actually a text message yesterday from Austin, who's on placement out in Porsche, and he's working with two of the students here on it. And he said, Rich, how do we apply for the Autodesk? So I believe, do we send you emails of the student teams that we're going to go with? So I was just going to confirm with you that that's how we do it, and then I'll get back to him. But yes, I think we've got 2 or 3 teams that are ready to compete this year. They're really excited about it in the brief, and for me, it was a great competition last year, and it was great to go to Darmstadt and see the exhibition and listen to the keynotes and talk amongst the community. It was really great.
Yeah, I was incredibly proud of the guys who submitted their work and were shortlisted. It was an amazing achievement. It's a brilliant competition, and to take students, graduates to the show, to present there and for their work to be seen on that stage is really exciting, really impressive. It's one of only a few competitions like that, so we really value it as a university. So yeah, thank you for putting it on.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to meet Michael and Erky. I think they did a really great job. I think, Richard, you did a great job at mentoring them. I think everybody had a good time with some fine German beverages. So I think, and I think it's, you're saying, meet people, make contacts. And I mean, in Darmstadt, it's literally the entire industry is there. So hopefully they get to see that, this is where you need to be and talk to people. It's a small industry. You will run into them again at some point.
Yeah, totally. That was a super event, and we really emphasized with the students how important it is for them to take part in this competition. Because one of the problems you always have with students, Dan knows more than me because he's been teaching longer, is to get them to do anything that's not a part of their curriculum is often
tricky.
Yeah.
I know. Why would I do that extra? Said my kids.
Yeah. I've got too much on, but the ones that do it, the rewards are there.
They are. They might not always be, tangible, but trust me, the rewards are there.
Yeah.
So Dan, Lewis, Richard Gilmartin, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on the podcast with me. I would like to wish the entries from your school good luck into our next contest. And I can't wait to see what all the works of the students will be in the contest and outside the contest. Hopefully I'll get to come to your degree show whenever it happens next year.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We'll invite you in. End of May.
Yeah.
End of May. I'll put that in my calendar. Once again, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having
us. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching, and catch you next time.